Hello everyone, welcome to the Sweeney Show, Business and Law Podcast, and joining me here today is Sonia McEntee, Solicitor, sole practitioner still. Sonia, I know you have big plans for the future, but you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, David.
Delighted
to be here.
Are you based in Cavan, or are you in Dublin, or what's your current business?
No, the office is physically located in Cavan. I moved the practice from Dublin back to Cavan just in 2017, so that was a lifestyle decision, if you like. The practice, I had been living back in Cavan for quite a few years, so I was driving up and down to Dublin a lot, and I've been able to build the practice in such a way that most of my communications with clients were online or were telephone based anyway. So still in Dublin a couple of times a month, but otherwise full-time based in Cavan, yeah.
Very good. And what's your, I suppose, your legal background? Do you have an undergraduate? Where did you go to college and train?
Yeah, well, I've no, I suppose, family history in the law, if you like, and there are a few McEntees around, so it's a question I do get asked from time to time, but I say no, I'm practicing absolutely in my own right. I went to UCD in Dublin and did my BCL there, and following that, we were just coming into a time when I knew I wanted to qualify as a solicitor, but we were coming into a time where it was really hard to find traineeships, so I stayed on in UCD and I did the LLM in European law, and so spent an extra year there. And by the time I had come through that, I found a temporary role with a solicitor in Harold's Cross, which was actually to cover the time that his trainee was going to be in Blackhall Place doing her PPC 1. And then while I was there, I found an apprenticeship of my own. It took about 200 CVs out of the post, David. It was tough going at the time, yeah.
Did you enjoy your experience in UCD?
Yes and no. And I say that because I didn't have grant support, I suppose, and I was coming up, it was the first of our family to go to third level education. So I had taken a year out between doing my Leaving Cert and starting in UCD. So I had worked during that year. I'd actually spent part of it in New York, as it happens. So I'd been able to save quite a bit of money, and I got myself through my first year in UCD without too much difficulty. But when I went into second year, I had to take up a part-time job, and that part-time job became a 30-hour-a-week job. So trying to do that on top of getting to my lectures in the first place, doing the study that I needed to do, and then of course trying to be involved in the social side of things as well to the best extent that I could. So I kind of look back on it with mixed feelings, I have to say.
Yeah, I have a similar story. I went to UCD as well, and I was kind of the country boy brought up to the big city bright lights, and it's huge. I don't think people appreciate the actual scale of the size of UCD as a physical college, and then the amount of people there, and then the scale of the work you must take on as a student.
Yeah, well, I went out there about 2 or 3 years ago to listen to Richard Susskind was there actually delivering a talk in relation to the future of the legal profession. So I went out to listen to that. I just didn't recognise the place. I mean, barely find my way around it, So it's very, very different now to even when we were there.
The row book and all the law lecture things all changed as well. It has revamped the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, we were the first year, I think, that had been moved over to Roebuck, so there was quite a student movement, and we protested outside the admin building and all of those sorts of things that I suppose make the best of any college experience. Yeah.
And so then did you then train your full sister traineeship in that place in Harold's Cross or Rathmines?
Rathmines actually, yeah, and it, as I said, it was quite hard to find that traineeship in the first place. But then when I found it, it was on my doorstep, which was great because I was living in Harold's Cross, just off Grosvenor Road in Rathmines, I'm sure, which a lot of people will know. A lot of people who studied in Dublin. So, yes, with a practice then in Rathmines, a sole practitioner, his main areas of business were personal injuries work and conveyancing, some probate as well. So it was a broad-based traineeship. I did a lot of the work in the office, there was no doubt about that, which had pros and cons, but certainly one of the things that I would always credit to that particular solicitor is that I really learned how to think on my feet, because it wasn't unheard of for a file to be put on my desk at 10 o'clock to be told you're in court at 11. And, and on occasion you were being sent out to do various bits and pieces on your own. Yeah. So, I'll never forget my first ever appearance in court and trying to memorize what it was that I was applying to the judge for. and going over and over and trying to make sure that I understood what I was saying and that the words were in the right order. It was nerve-wracking.
I think that's
so
an experience.
Got it done.
Yeah,
got what we needed. Yeah.
That's an experience everybody has the first day in court,
Yeah.
I think, isn't it? You can see, and especially in Cork, solicitors are quite collegiate and people are there to help you, and the barristers especially. But when you're in the moment yourself, and you're kind of getting used to how cold the courtroom is and how serious it is quite daunting.
Yeah, it is quite daunting. And I think that, in fact, going back to my traineeship as well, and the experiences that I had in the district court, and a lot of the work that I did was in Dolphin House, in the family law court at that time, I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like it at all. And so my career path turned away from the courts, if you like. And as I moved forward, again, I took time off again to live my life between following qualification and before I started out working on a full-time basis. But, I moved into taxation then, very much a legal consultancy, if you like. And even the practice as I've developed it since, a lot of it is advisory and, a lot of it is advisory rather than being litigation focused. And
did you then start working on your own quite soon after qualification, or when did you set up your own business?
I set up the practice in 2002, but I had qualified in 1998. And after that, I took myself off to Australia for a year, as was the done thing, I suppose, at the time. Yeah. And the reaction in my family was interesting. My parents, my brothers, my sister, very supportive. Anyone outside of that looked at me and thought and said, are you mad? Yeah. Because I was 25, I think, at that point in time. So everybody expected that I was just going to move on. I'd done my training. I was qualified now at this point, that you were just going to find yourself that serious job that was waiting for you at the end of it. The traineeship that I had, it was always the agreement that there wasn't going to be a full-time job for me in that office after I qualified. The solicitor would keep me on until I found something else. But in any event, I found myself on my way on a round-the-world journey, and it was just phenomenal. But I spent 6 months of that in Sydney, working in a law firm in Sydney. And once again, great insights, great experience, and the work that I was doing there. And because obviously I wasn't qualified to work as a solicitor over there, so the role that I had was that of a paralegal. But paralegals have rights of audience in the courts in certain respects. So I was able to travel all across New South Wales. So, a court appearance on any given day could mean out to the airport and onto a small little airplane and up into the back of Beyonds to attend court in a country area, back into Sydney that evening. So, wow. It was a brilliant life experience, but there was some legal experience built in there too. But that was very much at a time when the economy was booming here. So I had multiple job offers even as I was on my way back to Ireland. So I went into Ernst & Young actually, and I had already done the tax exams. I had done those while I was training to be a solicitor. And I went in there and loved the work there. I have to say, loved the work there. And it's funny now how things are changing for me now, and I find myself turning back towards some of that kind of work again. Yeah.
And so when you set up your business, you were based in Dublin, was it? And it was a general practice type business again at the start?
Yeah, when I set up the business, I suppose the property market was booming, and I had a really excellent grounding in taxation, and the work that I had done in Ernst & Young, a lot of it had been very property focused, both domestic and international. So really good handle on all of the taxation issues arising around development and all of that. So the intention in setting up the practice was that I would develop something quite focused on commercial transactions, and bring the tax experience to that. But I suppose it was at a time, that was 2004, it was at a time when the residential market was almost losing the run of itself, and the firm I probably took on too much of that residential work, pulling myself away from the commercial work that I wanted to focus on. And of course then 2007, 2008 wasn't too far further down that particular road, and that had serious implications for me then. But so it was a very heavily property focused practice really from the day I set it up.
And how did you cope with that then? Did your firm pivot, or did you just narrow down, or how did you deal with those couple of years?
How did I deal with them? I suppose I just got through them, I think, David, or started off in that way anyway. Shell shock might have been the first reaction, and we've experienced maybe a little bit of that again more recently, but it took me a little bit of time to figure out, because I really, at that point, I looked at closing the practice, and we were also heading into, and you might recall, what became a really serious insurance crisis that was just ahead of us at that time as well. So really serious, heavy issues there within the practice, and that really weighed down on me. There's no doubt about that.
Sorry,
but
just to explain the insurance, what you mean is the professional indemnity insurance for solicitors at the time, was it?
Yeah, the professional indemnity insurance. So I mean, going back to the cost of that insurance, in those early years of practice, I think I was probably paying about €3,000 a year for my PI cover, and then we found, then it doubled in 1 year, and then the following year it went up by something like, it went up another 300%, something quite outrageous, So that was when we saw crisis, and particularly very, very much so for small practitioners, because we found ourselves at a time where you went out into the market to get your insurance. You had always taken for granted that you could get insurance, and all of a sudden you found yourself feeling lucky if you got one insurance proposal, one quote back to you, and found yourself in a situation where you just had to find the money to pay whatever the price was. So, I mean, a really, really difficult couple of years. So I'm not, people listening to this will remember that, and it's not that long ago.
And so then we come up to the mid 2000s, shall we say, because I know on your website it's apartment law. Was that a speciality you wanted to get into, or how did that come about?
Well, that really was born out of that financial crash, if you like, because the level of work had fallen off so dramatically. I really sat down and worked through how I was going to move forward, how I could position myself in a market where, and particularly for what you might call your regular residential conveyancing transactions, people were very much starting to shop around. Loyalty to your solicitor wasn't necessarily as strong as it might have been previously. It started to be more about pricing. So I needed to find a way to try to distinguish myself from other property solicitors, from the offering that I had. So that was where apartment law came from. And it was in the context of the Multiunit Development Act was on the point of being enacted. So this was a new piece of legislation. It was supposed to be the answer to all ills. I mean, it wasn't. I could see that then. I can certainly say that now. But it was very topical, if you like. Yeah. What was also coming in around that time was the regulation of property service providers. So again, where management companies were having difficulties with their agents, and that was a regular problem. But now agents were going to be subject to a regulatory regime as well. So there were new laws coming into effect, and there was an opportunity there for me to take advantage of that and then position myself, I suppose, in this area.
Can I just ask you, maybe not a technical question, but just the Multi-Unit Development Act, we know it as the MUD Act, M-U-D Act.
Yeah.
What was that about? So if you're buying an apartment, just for say, if there's a lay person out there, someone who's going to buy an apartment, a first-time buyer, what do they need to be aware of? What's so different about buying an apartment and buying a residential home, or like your normal terraced house, what that might be, as opposed to apartment living or apartment purchase?
I suppose the thing about apartment living is to remember that it's community living. You're moving into a community of owners. And with community living, there are rules and regulations that apply that simply don't apply if you're buying a house on your own. And this is before we even go into the legal structure of the ownership, which is quite different. But I think for anyone looking at or thinking of buying apartments, the thing to remember is that you are subject to rules and regulations. And the big one, and the one that I suppose causes the most anxiety, is the payment of service charges on an annual basis. And I suppose we've seen this become a bigger issue over the last 10 years as construction related defects and fire safety defects have been uncovered in developments, and the funding isn't there to put these problems right. The developers, of course, are by and large gone, no longer available, so no recourse there, and owners are having to put their hands in their own pockets. So I think for many, many people, the excitement perhaps of buying a first property outweighs the understanding of what it is that they're buying into. So very, very rigid ownership structure. And, and that goes so far as perhaps not being able to keep pets in the property. And then as people live longer in apartments, children maybe aren't allowed to play ball outside, and all of these sorts of family issues as well that arise.
You're technically just buying a cube of air, really, aren't you?
You really are. And when I'm explaining it to people, I literally draw boxes on a page with a big box around the edge and show them what it is and explain it to them in that way. You're just buying that internal unit. And it also means, and some of the problems I've dealt with for clients over the years, I mean, take leaks. Oh my God. It's like every apartment development in the country has leaks at some. It might be doors, it might be windows, it might be the roof. But the problem with water is that you just don't know where it's going to go. So if there's a breach somewhere, you've no idea where that water is going to go. So if you find a leak in your apartment, you might not know where the water has come from. And because you don't own the walls and you don't own the roof, you can do very little about it other than go to your management company. Yeah. And there's another problem too, because the directors of the management companies are all volunteers. They're typically owners in the development who already have full-time jobs and other responsibilities. And so they're being asked to make big decisions around spending money which is not theirs to spend, because they do believe and understand that the money that they hold is on trust for all of the owners, if you like. It can be very, very difficult to bring a management company through that decision-making process in a timely way. And meanwhile, you might be looking at, mold developing on your ceiling, for example. Yeah.
One of the issues I've seen down through the years, and I'm sure you're familiar with, is that, back in the day, the developer bought the site and he built the apartments, or she built the apartments and sold them on. And then the management company would control the common areas, the outside, the grass, the lights, all that, footpaths, all that kind of stuff. But what used to happen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that the developer would transfer the management company, the common area, to their own company, and they would really charge that fee and manage it, starting off the estate. But what happened then was the developer went bust, and there's kind of a vacuum, or this kind of ground where a no man's land, where a management company was either originally in the developer's name or developer's company. The apartment owners are just individuals who own their apartment, but there seems to be a grey area between the apartment owner and the management company either not being assigned over to a new management company of the residents, or something happened along the way with that documentation.
Well, you've touched on about 10 problems, 10 distinct problems in that. But that is one area where the Multiunit Development Act has helped. Yeah. So even when that work was underway in the drafting of that legislation, we couldn't have foreseen what was going to happen over, say, from 2010 to 2015, that development companies as we knew them were largely going to be wiped from existence, and leaving a lot of developments, as you said, in that legal kind of limbo in relation to their own common areas. So what has happened in many respects is that the owners themselves did take up the baton and started to work using their own management company. So they appointed agents, they started issuing the service charges, they started making all of the decisions. In relation to the common areas then, a couple of issues there that can arise from time to time. You may be dealing with a receiver, for example, who might be managing what's effectively going to become a wind-up of the receiver's affair, of the original developer's affairs. That's hard work, because these types of issues are not the top of their list of priorities, and particularly where they might already have sold out any remaining units in the development. There's no interest there's no economic interest left in the development. There's no interest in getting that housekeeping done, if you like, in relation to the common areas. But in other cases, the receivers aren't there, but the developers themselves have just gone to ground. Perhaps they can't be found is another issue. Some of them have taken off and gone abroad, and they may genuinely just not be around to do it. So the Multiunit Development Act did open up the possibility of applying to the Circuit Court for various types of orders to rectify that situation. So in that respect, it was a very useful piece of legislation. The difficulty there, though, is there's no penalty for the developer. So, still I would have clients coming to me with various issues, and one of the questions you ask, have the common areas been transferred? I'm not sure, or maybe they say no, they haven't. Where's the developer? Don't know. Who's the developer? Don't know that either. So you get into looking at that and you find out what it is that you need to do. But here we are 10 years later, and because there are no penalties in the Act. All of this should have been done within 6 months of enactment, and it wasn't, but there are no penalties.
That obviously is a big issue for a purchaser. It's an issue in itself, even if you're a cash purchaser, but if you're buying your apartment with a mortgage or with a bank, those answers have to be found before the bank will release its mortgage, and there's the problem.
Yeah, I think a very pragmatic approach, though, has been taken to this, and it really comes down to whether the owner's management company has become engaged on the issue or in the issue and has appointed legal representation. Because if a purchasing solicitor knows that the owner's management company has appointed a solicitor to sort out whatever it is that the problem happens to be, and that can be reported on back to the bank, that generally resolves that. But it's in circumstances where those steps haven't been taken, and there are many management companies out there where people are concerned about getting involved in the legal process. They don't know how long it's going to take. They don't know how much it's going to cost. So that's the first conversation to have with any of the directors of these companies, is to try to take them through that, and also to set out for them all of the very good reasons why they should do this. And when it comes back to each individual owner, as you've just said there, if you're going to have a difficulty getting a mortgage to buy a property, or indeed if when you want to sell your property, a purchaser is going to have a problem getting a mortgage, that's going to impact on price. And I mean, what is it that we all care about at the end of the day? It's what our own property is going to be worth if we want to sell it.
And I've seen down in some instances, some city councils and county councils have taken over common areas in the running of management companies. Is that a common practice, or do you see that happening more?
Well, I can't say now that I've seen them taking over the running of the management companies, if you like, but there has certainly been a move. There was a move previously where in planning permissions, for example, a condition may be written into a planning permission to say that a management company would have to be put in place to manage the estate into the future. And there's been a very clear move away from that policy. So policy at the moment would be that the roads and services would ultimately be taken into the charge of the local authority, or obviously Irish Water would be involved now in relation to the water services. But that still leaves, I suppose, residual common areas like green areas, or, and I ended up in the circuit court on this particular issue a couple of years ago, but other aspects that people don't really think about, like your boundary walls, your boundary hedging or fencing, or things like that. So people they're conscious of the green areas because there is grass to be cut or shrubs to be maintained, or whatever it might be. But certainly I have seen within housing estates a move in some of those housing estates where perhaps the original management company has been dissolved. It just maybe wasn't managed very well at the outset, but where the council have come in and the roads and services have been taken over, that the house owners themselves have moved to a more informal kind of management, a more residents association kind of management, and maybe they collect €50 or €80 or €100 a year, and that's for insurance purposes, but managing and maintaining just those limited green areas. And some of those green areas are really small, and you might have a roadway which is in the charge of the local authority and a footpath which is in the charge of the local authority, but a green verge between the two which is not in the charge of the local authority. So you have to look at these things. I suppose as an OMC solicitor, you're looking at things like that very quickly, or very closely, so that you can explain to your director clients what it is that they are actually responsible for. And sometimes it's about how they can reconnect with owners who have fallen away from that community structure, if you like.
Wow, look, that's a really interesting and informative conversation, Sonia. Thank you so much for your time today, and what really is a technical part of the law. What's your plans for the future yourself personally and for the practice?
Well, I have, I mentioned the last financial crash, David, and maybe a little bit of soul searching that I had done at that point in time. And a couple of months ago, found myself in the office thinking, oh my God, we're staring into this black hole now again, and I don't know what it is. So entirely coincidentally, I received an email into my inbox from another firm of solicitors who are expanding, and I've been talking to them over the last couple of months. So I will be joining the firm of Tully Rinky in Dublin in September, and really, really looking forward to that. They're an American firm that opened in Dublin in 2017. So growing at a rapid rate, and what we have found through our discussions is that the work that I've been doing, and I suppose the experience that I've built up, dovetails very nicely with some of the work that they're doing as well and looking to expand on. So I suppose, David, I've found that I'm a firm believer in reviewing and, assessing your life from time to time, as well as maybe just your practice or whatever it might be. And what I have found is that there's a lot going on in various places, and there's a lot of uncertainty now into, over the next, at least I suppose 12 months or so. And I felt something I felt needed to change. And what I see this as being for me is really a relinquishing of the business management responsibilities of working in the law. So I've done it, I think, for long enough. I will say absolutely that I have loved working as a sole practitioner. There's no doubt about that. It has given me great flexibility over the last 10 years in terms of family life and all of that sort of thing too. But I feel now that this is a new phase. It's a new chapter. Yeah, and I'm ready to move forward with it.
Was that, were you able to distinguish, was it an emotional decision for you? Is there an ego involved there? How did you come about? Or is it just very much a practical decision?
No. For me, I think it's been very much a practical decision, and I suppose it's a career decision as well. I don't feel that I don't believe that any of us should feel confined by the decisions perhaps that we might have made in the past, as to where our own careers might be going or what it is that we want to do. And I wanted to have my own practice, and I have done that now, and I've done it, I think, with some reasonable success to date. But now I find that it does bring with it a very significant responsibility and a very heavy burden of responsibility. And that responsibility can conflict with you practicing law, because you only have so many hours in the day. There's only so much that you can get done. And certainly what I find now, and as I said, heading into another period of uncertainty, this timing was just opportune. So I got involved in the conversation, and it's gone really well, and I'm really delighted now with the decision that I've made around this.
Well, listen, we sincerely wish you all the best and congratulate you, and I'm sure it's going to be a big success for you. If there's a recent graduate or undergraduate or someone that's about to sit the Blackhall exams right now watching this, what advice would you give to someone starting out in a career in law?
I think I would suggest that they look really closely at all of the different areas of law that we now have. We chatted a little bit earlier, David, about the general practice, and so many of us would have come up through general practice where you did a little bit of whatever needed to be done in the practice. So the decision that I made a number of years ago was that I wanted to narrow the focus of the legal work that I was doing, become more specialist. That has worked really well, because I've generated work from other solicitors who don't feel that they want to get involved in that particular area of law. Oh, I know who I can send you to, and I'll take on that piece of work for them. So that has worked really well for me. And I think there's a lot to be said for working within a more refined area and being really, really good at it. But what I would also say is to try to find where the passion lies. Because I don't know whether, and going back to what I said earlier about being in UCD and then moving forward into training and that sort of thing, I was on a path where, yes, I needed to support myself. I needed to get a job that was going to pay. And if I was back there now, I might make I would still go into the law. Law was absolutely the right career choice for me, but I might have chosen different areas of law to work in. So really, really look for where the passion lies, and then go and identify within the profession who are the people you need to talk to about trying to get into that area of law. So that would be, find the passion. Yeah. That's
great advice. Listen, Sonia, thank you so much for your time, and we sincerely wish you all the very best for the future. Thank you.
Thanks a million.